paid much attention to insects. They were simply a part of the background noise of life, occasionally swatted away or stepped on, but otherwise ignored. That changed on a warm Tuesday evening in late August, a day that would mark the beginning of the end, not just for Martin, but for humanity as he knew it. He was walking home from his job at the local accounting firm, taking his usual shortcut through Willow Park. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the path, when he felt a sharp sting on the back of his neck. Martin slapped at it instinctively, his hand coming away with the crushed remains of what looked like an oversized wasp.
Ugh, gross,
he muttered, flicking the insect carcass away. He rubbed at the sting, which was already starting to swell. It itched fiercely, but Martin thought little of it. After all, it was just a bug bite. That night, Martin tossed and turned in his sleep. His dreams were vivid and unsettling, filled with the sound of buzzing wings and the sensation of countless legs crawling over his skin. In his nightmare, he was trapped in a massive hive, the walls pulsing with life. Thousands of insect eyes watched him, their compound surfaces reflecting his terrified face. He woke several times, drenched in sweat, the itch on his neck now a burning sensation that seemed to be spreading across his shoulders. Each time he drifted back to sleep, the dreams intensified. He saw himself changing, his skin hardening into a chitinous shell, extra limbs bursting from his torso. He tried to scream, but all that came out was a high-pitched buzzing. By morning, the sting site had swollen to the size of a golf ball, the skin around it an angry red. Martin examined it in the bathroom mirror, frowning at the small, dark hairs that seemed to be sprouting from the center of the swelling. They were coarse and bristly, unlike anything he'd seen before. As he leaned in for a closer look, he could have sworn he saw something move beneath his skin.
Must be some kind of allergic reaction,
he told himself, swallowing a couple of antihistamines before heading to work. But deep down, he knew this was something more, something worse. Throughout the day, Martin found himself constantly scratching at his neck and shoulders. The itch was maddening, and he could swear the hairs were growing longer by the hour. By lunchtime, his colleagues were giving him strange looks.
You okay, Martin?
His cubicle neighbor, Sarah, asked.
You look a bit off.
Martin forced a smile.
Just a bug bite, nothing to worry about.
But as he said it, he felt a strange sensation in his mouth, as if his tongue was too big for his jaw. When he excused himself to the bathroom, he was horrified to see that his eyes had taken on a strange, faceted appearance, like those of a fly. He blinked rapidly, hoping it was just a trick of the light. But the segmented pattern remained, growing more pronounced by the second. Panic rising in his chest, Martin grabbed his things and left work early, ignoring the concerned calls of his coworkers. He needed to see a doctor immediately. The wait at the urgent care clinic was interminable. Martin sat in the corner of the waiting room, his collar pulled up high to hide the now golf ball-sized lump on his neck. He could feel it pulsing, as if something inside was trying to get out. Every few minutes, a sharp pain would shoot through his body, accompanied by a distinct crackling sound, like bones shifting beneath his skin. When he finally saw the doctor, the man's reaction did nothing to calm Martin's fears. The physician's eyes widened as he examined the growth, his latex-gloved hands probing the bristly surface.
I've never seen anything like this,
the doctor admitted, his voice a mix of fascination and horror.
We'll need to run some tests. In the meantime, I'm going to give you a strong antibiotic and some corticosteroids. If it gets any worse, go straight to the emergency room.
As the doctor turned to write the prescription, Martin caught his reflection in a metal cabinet. For a split second, he could have sworn his face rippled, the skin seeming to crawl with a life of its own. He blinked, and his normal reflection returned, but the image of his face shifting and writhing stayed with him, a terrifying premonition of what was to come. That night, Martin's transformation accelerated. He woke in the early hours of the morning to find his sheets shredded, torn by the sharp, claw-like appendages that had replaced his fingers while he slept. His skin had taken on a hard, glossy sheen, more like an exoskeleton than human flesh. When he tried to stand, he found his balance off, his body leaning forward as if expecting support from limbs that weren't there. Not yet, at least. Stumbling to the bathroom, Martin barely recognized the creature staring back at him from the mirror. His eyes had multiplied, compound orbs spreading across what used to be his face. When he opened his mouth to scream, all that came out was a high-pitched chittering sound. His teeth had fused together, forming mandibles that clicked and clacked as he tried to speak. In a panic, Martin fumbled for his phone, intending to call for help. But his new appendages were ill-suited for the touch screen. As he struggled with the device, he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. Looking down, he saw his stomach distend, the skin stretching and bulging, as if something was trying to push its way out. With a sickening tearing sound, his shirt split open, revealing a series of segments forming along his torso. From between these segments, thin, spindly limbs began to emerge, twitching and flexing as they grew. Martin's mind reeled, unable to process the horror of his transformation. He tried to rationalize it, to find some explanation that didn't end with him becoming a monstrous hybrid of man and insect. But as he felt his internal organs shift and reform, adapting to his new body, he knew there was no denying the terrifying reality of his situation. Over the next few days, Martin's humanity slipped away piece by piece. His extra limbs grew stronger, allowing him to scuttle across walls and ceilings with ease. He could no longer eat solid food, instead finding himself drawn to sweet liquids that he sucked up through a horrific proboscis that had replaced his mouth. His digestive system had simplified, breaking down the sugary substances into energy that fueled his ever-changing body. But the worst part wasn't the physical changes. It was the voices in his head. At first, they were just whispers, barely audible above his own panicked thoughts. But as his transformation progressed, they grew louder, more insistent. They spoke of the hive, of the queen, of the great purpose that awaited him. Martin tried to resist, to hold on to his human consciousness. He attempted to write down his experiences, to leave some record of what had happened to him. But his clawed hands could no longer hold a pen, and when he tried to type on his computer, he found the words slipping away from him, replaced by strings of random characters that looked more like the pheromone trails of ants than human language. By the end of the week, Martin's apartment had become a cocoon of sorts. He had instinctively covered every surface with a thick, sticky secretion that hardened into a resin-like substance. In the center of this nightmare nest, Martin hung from the ceiling, his once human body now a monstrous hybrid of man and insect. And still, the changes continued. Martin's consciousness began to fragment, splintering into 1,000 tiny pieces. Each compound eye seemed to have a mind of its own, bombarding him with kaleidoscopic visions that his brain struggled to process. He saw the world in ultraviolet, picked up on subtle vibrations in the air, and could sense the Earth's magnetic field, abilities that would have fascinated him as a human, but now only served to further erode his sense of self. The voices in his head grew louder, drowning out his own thoughts. They spoke of others like him, of a growing army hidden in the shadows of the city. Martin realized with horror that he wasn't an isolated incident. Whatever had infected him was spreading, creating more creatures like himself. In his more lucid moments, Martin tried to piece together what was happening. He remembered the wasp that had stung him, how it had seemed larger than normal. Had it been some kind of mutant? A genetically engineered weapon? Or something even more sinister? Perhaps not of this world at all. But these moments of clarity became increasingly rare as the hive mind took over. Martin felt his individuality slipping away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of belonging to something greater than himself. The great purpose, the voices called it. The reshaping of the world to suit their kind. As his transformation neared its completion, Martin became aware of a new presence in his mind. It was vast, ancient, and utterly alien. The Queen, he realized. She was calling to him, to all of her children. It was time to emerge, to take their place in the new world order. 2 weeks after the initial sting, what was left of Martin Crane finally broke free from his apartment. The creature that emerged bore no resemblance to the man who had once lived there. It skittered down the walls of the building on multiple legs, its compound eyes taking in every detail of the night-shrouded city. The streets were oddly empty. Martin's fractured mind noticed. No cars, no pedestrians. Had the transformation already spread so far? Or had the few remaining humans gone into hiding? As he moved through the silent city, Martin became aware of others like him. They emerged from dark alleys and abandoned buildings, a chittering swarm of hybrid monstrosities. Some still bore vestiges of their human forms. A shock of hair here, a scrap of clothing there. Others were further along in their metamorphosis, their bodies wholly alien. They converged on a central point, drawn by some unheard signal. Martin found himself swept along with the tide, his own will subsumed by the collective consciousness of the swarm. They poured into an old subway station, descending into the depths of the earth. The tunnel opened up into a vast cavern, its walls coated with the same resin-like substance that Martin had secreted in his apartment. And there, in the center of this underground hive, was the Queen. She was massive, her bloated body pulsing with eggs. What might have once been a human face was now a nightmarish visage of mandibles and compound eyes. As Martin approached, driven forward by the will of the hive, he felt a sense of reverence and terror in equal measure. The Queen's voice filled his mind, drowning out all other thoughts.
"Welcome, my child,"
she chittered.
"You have come home at last."
Martin wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare, but his body moved of its own accord, approaching the Queen and prostrating itself before her. He felt her feelers probe his form, assessing his transformation.
"Yes,"
she said, her voice filled with satisfaction.
"you will do nicely. It is time for you to serve the hive."
With horror, Martin realized what was about to happen. His body began to change again, his abdomen swelling as it filled with eggs. He was to be a carrier, spreading the infection to new hosts. As the eggs grew within him, Martin felt the last shreds of his humanity slipping away. His mind fragmented further, becoming nothing more than a collection of instincts and imperatives. Serve the hive. Spread the eggs. Expand the colony. In his final moments of self-awareness, Martin Crane mourned for the world he had known, for the future that had been stolen from humanity, and for himself, forever lost in the chittering madness of the hive. The creature that had once been Martin Crane emerged from the subway station as dawn broke over the silent city. It skittered along the empty streets, seeking out the few remaining pockets of uninfected humans. In dark alleys and forgotten corners, it would lie in wait, ready to sting, to implant, to spread the curse of the hive. And deep within its insectoid brain, a tiny fragment of Martin's consciousness remained, trapped, aware, screaming silently for all eternity. The transformation was complete. The hive was growing, and the world of humans was coming to an end, not with a bang, but with the soft buzz of insect wings. As the days passed, the last vestiges of human civilization crumbled. The hive spread rapidly, its drones, former men and women, swarming through cities and towns, countryside and wilderness. Those who resisted were quickly overwhelmed, their bodies becoming hosts for the next generation of the hive. The military attempted to fight back, but their weapons proved ineffective against the rapidly evolving insectoid creatures. Bullets bounced off hardened carapaces, and even when a drone was destroyed, the pheromones released by its dying body only served to draw more of its kind to the area. Scientists worked frantically to find a cure, a way to reverse the transformation. But they were fighting a losing battle against an enemy that adapted faster than they could study it. One by one, research facilities fell silent, their inhabitants absorbed into the ever-growing hive. As the human population dwindled, the Earth itself began to change. The hive's drones reshaped the landscape, building vast structures of secreted resin that reached towards the sky. Forests were consumed and regrown as bizarre, alien ecosystems that catered to the needs of the insectoid society. And through it all, the queen grew larger and more powerful. Her mind expanded, connecting with queens in other hives across the globe. Together, they formed a neural network that spanned the planet, directing their drones in a coordinated effort to remake the world in their image. Years passed. Decades. The last pockets of human resistance were snuffed out. The hive became the dominant and only form of intelligent life on Earth, and somewhere, in the depths of a hive that had once been a thriving human city, a drone that had once been Martin Crane continued its endless labor. It had no memory of its former life, no concept of individuality or self. It lived only to serve the hive, to further the great purpose. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between frenzied activity, a tiny spark of awareness would flicker in its compound eyes, a fragment of a memory, of warm sun on human skin, of laughter shared with friends, of a world now lost forever. In those moments, the part of Martin that still existed would silently scream, a cry of anguish and regret that would never be heard. And then the moment would pass, swallowed up by the relentless, buzzing purposefulness of the hive. The age of humanity had ended. The age of the hive had begun, and the Earth continued its journey through the cosmos, its surface now alien and unrecognizable, forever changed by the fateful sting of a mutant wasp on a warm August evening.